have decided to do a one-on-one broadcast here and explain to people about my latest articles. And I think that there is something going on here that people are not realizing. And I understand that this stuff that I analyze is not in the norm and that people may not like to hear it. And people that haven't sort of accepted the reality of the alien presence on our planet, the visitation, and so on, that has been going on the past 80 years, that the UAP hearings are attempting to reveal, not doing a great job, but they do have great witnesses and military people coming forward who have no reason to lie. And so I think it's very important that people start realizing that we are being visited. And I write articles on my Substack often about this subject matter, as well as the White Hats, Trump, what's going on with the various aspects of our world, the politics, the exopolitics, and so on. So I'm going to just kind of go off the top of my head here, and I'm also going to read some of my latest article and the addendum that I added to it today. So I'm not sure what is the right order to do this in. I hope you'll bear with me because it's kind of difficult. It's a little bit convoluted, and it goes back to the Wingmakers material, James Neruda, who is actually, I believe, James, who is the originator and the creator. And he was inspired by, I guess, downloads from the Wingmakers. And he wrote about leaving the ACIO, which is an organization that is supposed to be behind the scenes, investigating the alien presence and various things of that nature. He was working there, I think, most of his young life, and he has since left, and he has been in touch with me over the years. Initially, because I got the rights to shop the Wingmaker's story for a year while I was working in Hollywood, and that was 20 years ago, or over 20 years ago. And so it is a incredible story. There are several books that he's written about the Wingmakers and about the whole overall Ancient Arrow project, this mysterious organization, ACIO, the Labyrinth Group, and so on. And they have a huge following, the wingmakers.com website online. So some people will definitely know what I'm talking about. Other people will have maybe thought it was all fiction. But as far as I'm concerned, Neruda, and there are these amazing interviews with Neruda conducted by a person called Sarah, I believe. And those are actual real interviews as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of the personality of Neruda is very similar to the personality of James, of course. And so this is a person who is more or less in hiding, I think, even now. But he is involved in the making of a movie that's based on one of his books, or at least a screenplay called Copernicus. And I tried to get involved in that, and that didn't work out. But I learned quite a bit about it, and I don't know if it's still being worked on or not. But I have been in dialogues on and off over email with James, and so on. So the basic premise of the Wingmakers material is that sometime in the future, this organization, who's led by an individual called 15, who's supposed to have way beyond normal intelligence. In fact, the whole group has had their intelligence enhanced. So whereas they might have been around 200 or more, they are now, I guess, much, much more than that. So, for what it's worth, their intelligence might factor in on your decision whether or not to believe what I have to say. At any rate, it's sort of a secret part of the secret space program, if you will, and they're more of a, I think, behind the scenes research organization than a hands-on secret space program uh, or operation. So what I want to say here is that the premise again is that sometime in our future, a race of androids is going to come by our solar system and spot Earth, decide to come here and invade, and then what happens after that? And this information is not unknown to the planet. There are other I guess, ancient writings and various references that have been made to this eventuality in various writings around the world. In particular, one of my whistleblowers, uh, who's was one of our top whistleblowers, Pete Peterson, who worked for the SSP most of his life, over 40 years, and then started to disclose on one weekend a great deal of information to three of us, which was myself, David Wilcock, and Bill Ryan. The third one of the interviews with him, which was conducted after a whole weekend going from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, happened on the Monday. And then he actually said, now you can turn on the cameras. And my particular section is dealing with Terminator, the Terminator series, as you may know, Skynet, and things of this nature. And he did admit to being a person who had created what he thought was a fail-safe chip for Skynet that would control not only the Earth-based AI, which is also in a satellite grid called Project Leonid, but also the aliens, stop the aliens from being able to hack our androids. And he said that there were teams or armies of androids in an underground base in our country and also in China in preparation for this eventuality, which in theory hasn't happened yet. And I was in contact with James over Three Eye Atlas, trying to find out whether that might be part of that eventuality. But he said that it was not. My understanding is that it may be an advance party. I think it's a surveillance, sort of testing the waters group, but I think there might be an affiliation there. So, and I've been pretty deep into the Three Eye Atlas information and looking into it from the point of view of, of a psychic intuitive and a remote viewer. I don't do a lot of remote viewing, but I have had some training and been accurate in that area with enough hits to make it viable. So getting back to this situation, so we have a story that most people don't even want to consider. But in an even terms of a metaphor, you could say that the advent of AI here on our planet and the incoming also, there is alien AI, and there was alien AI deposited on our Earth that we have been reverse engineering. Some people may know of it as black goo that infested the Gulf. And also, there was a fight with a group of aliens having to do with the Marconi scientists back in the day at the Falklands. And so this is not, as I say, an unknown story. Pieces of it have been out and around, although it is pretty much ignored by the UFO community, if you want to call them that, and certainly doesn't factor in most people's understanding of what's going on. However, because I have top whistleblowers, and in particular, those are military and ex-military by and large, and Captain Mark Richards that I've published already, two books of his testimony, which are on Amazon and I think are getting around stars. Um, is his testimony in writing. Also, I have done videos based on the 5 years of interviews I did with him around twice a year. So, but there's 12 interviews altogether. So, and I'm still in touch with Captain Mark Richards, although he has gone off the radar recently as a result of a piece of information he gave me about 3i Atlas that I think his handlers were not happy with. So now I haven't heard from him in quite a while, a couple months actually. So I do hope that he's going to resurface and that he's okay. What he said in a post that I made, which I quoted him from a texting sort of intranet that the present prison has with visitors, that you can pay money and communicate with the prisoners, texting. And so I got a slight answer to my question about 3i Atlas, and he said that our military would be using all means of force to deal with them. That's all he said. But, and I posted that, but I think for some reason that even that they didn't want out there. 3i Atlas is not benign, contrary to what Avi Loeb and maybe many others would say. If you do remote view and you look at it, you're looking at basically an Anunnaki ship or craft. And it is the Anunnaki are reptilian humanoid hybrids, to understand who they are. They're carved into the walls of Iraq and Iran and Egypt. So they're the large beings that are sometimes seen holding humans on their laps. They consider themselves to be in charge of us for many years. Enki and Enlil, their famous stories. Zachariah Sitchin wrote, I think, 12 books about them. And his interpretation of their Sumerian tablets left behind is not always agreed with. So there are different controversial translations and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, we do know there was a group. They were called the Anunnaki, but that just means those from heaven to earth came. The real racial name of their group is unknown, I think, by and large. And it's possible, I have recently heard, that they might be the same or related to the group from Aldebaran. In fact, they may be from one of the planets of Aldebaran, which gets into a whole nother story having to do with the Aldebaran that approached the Nazis during World War II. Maria Orsich and her group, and gave them the technology to win the war. They didn't use it then. They were told not to use it then, but they were told they would use it at a, I guess, later date. Arguably, that later date is now or nearly now. So that's worth contemplating. Now, I have tons of stuff about this subject on my website and in my articles and on my video interviews that I do quite often, and other people interview me. And once in a while, I'll do a video blog such as this one, but it's been quite a while. So, what I'm trying to say here is that no one seems to really consider my story here. That is not my story, but it's the story of the coming invasion of a group of androids, AI-run androids. And I think that this is worth considering simply because two of my top whistleblowers have been talking about it. And one is actually James the Wingmakers, who back channel has acknowledged that this is still in the offing, because I asked him if 3i Atlas was part of it. He said it's the first step or something of that nature. So anyway, getting back to this situation. So I am part of a small news group that involves some pretty high level people whose names I guess I won't use here, although they're known to you guys, probably, some of them. Others are just, I guess, are scientists and so on. This is a much smaller group than the one I used to be part of, which was involving Richard C. Hoagland and David Sereda. So this particular small group is going over some information. They were talking about this situation that we've had happen in Minnesota, and I think it's very instructional to understand how the ICE officers or minions, whatever you want to call them, soldiers, are going into this area of Minnesota, into neighborhoods, and obviously causing disturbance by their very presence. And so I want to read a short excerpt of what my article is all about, and then you can certainly read it online. It's again on Substack, and I'll put the link under this video too. But you can also go to my website, which is projectcamelotportal.com. And across the top are all my social media links, including Substack and Rumble, where I have all my videos. All my most recent videos are on Rumble. I used to have a very large YouTube channel back in the days before or during the COVID in March of 2021. They deleted my entire channel. At that point, I had 70 million viewers worldwide, and we'd been in operation for actually whatever number of years that was, 2005, so around 15 years or something, or 17 years. And now I've been doing this for 20 years. So I'm just going to read this and then move on and try to explain some things. And then this is not live, so I'm actually, I can edit out mistakes or things. But I hope you'll find it interesting and want to pursue this story, because I cannot get anyone so far who is read in on aspects of the secret space program the way I am. And that is by virtue of my whistleblowers again, and their testimonies. And over the years, I've been interviewing at least, over 1,000 people in all walks of life, not just whistleblowers, but there's a concentrated group of whistleblowers, and that is what I specialize in. So their testimony is most important. A lot of those whistleblowers came in the earlier days. Then they were fewer and far between, but I have some really key witnesses even to this day. I can say one of my top whistleblowers recently was taken off grid. The information is that he may be being sequestered during this time of Three Eye Atlas because he knows so much. I can't get anything beyond that, so I'm assuming he is somehow being locked down, because I think he would be in touch otherwise. So I'm hoping he's okay. I have a few other whistleblowers and other people that have been high level contacts, or contacts that simply have maybe information close to the story of Three Eye Atlas, who are no longer in touch with me either. So it's kind of interesting that some of my top whistleblowers and contacts are sort of have disappeared from the scene, even though they were not public. They were talking to me behind the scene. So, okay, so I'm going to go read this and hopefully it will make sense. So I start out with the addendum, which is kind of a short introduction to the article. And I'm saying that ICE is provocative, aimed to disturb the people and flush out the enemies, the members of the cartel and New World Order. And this is written today, this addendum. I'm saying that I don't like this whole ICE thing, going into people's homes and neighborhoods that are plainly against them. It sounds like the house to house that they did in Iraq back in the day. They don't need to be doing this by force. And I explain in my article that you'll read, hopefully above here, and I might highlight it later, a tactic that I think would have worked much better, but not for the purposes they want. And I'll explain that more. So I wrote this article to explain that this whole ICE thing is actually premeditated by Trump and the White Hats. And the point here is that they were let in because they were part of an invasion that had to do with Biden, who was actually executed prior to inauguration. And he was played after that by actors, doubles, and arguably clones. And that particular person or autopen was run by behind the scenes the Chinese who'd been associated with as well as MI6 and possibly other high level individuals on what we call the New World Order dark Illuminati side of things. At the same time, it appeared that the same person, possibly doubles as well, that were being manipulated in the public eye to convince the public that Biden was a real person, that he was really alive, and they may have also been controlling him. So there was sort of a tug of war over this person known as Biden, all right? And this went on for 4 years, which is insane. This is an information that's come from 107, who is the lead spokesperson for the White Hats and is actually JFK Jr. And he is a very good old friend of Trump. He is also a military person. From what I heard, he's higher than the rank of a general in this whole war of worlds that we're having going on right now. I outed him because I believe that his sacrifice of being in hiding and the ridiculous outfit that he wears to hide was was a sacrifice too far, and that was actually not going to help his soul trajectory. So I intervened in that sense, and I met him several times and talked to him in person several times. I also talked to his double, or a person pretending to be his double and wearing the same disguise, Wayne Willett. All of the last 4 years or so, I was in touch with them on and off, but not now. So anyway, that's the backstory, and all of this is on my website. There's all you have to do is put in JFK, and you'll get all the pictures and all the backing information and evidence that I have. It's up to you what you want to believe. You're going to have to really, in this whole war, I have to say, you cannot ask for proof in the same sense that people have used proof in the past. Most of what goes on is known to select groups in secret societies, such as the White Hats. And therefore, you need to use what resonates. The resonance between your heart and your mind and your intuition, and if you have any skills, above the and beyond the six senses. These are the kinds of things that you can augment your knowing with at this time. So if you don't have those access to those things, you probably have no idea what's really going on, I have to tell you. So, and unfortunately, there are plenty of people that have never tried to develop themselves in this way. So I understand that they may be clearly in the dark and making stupid statements because they don't have any context for what they see happening. It's as if you woke up, you know, today or tomorrow or yesterday, and you suddenly saw a bunch of ICE agents going into an American city and causing mayhem, the people rebelling against them, and you would side with the people, of course, but you wouldn't understand the context and what has gone on before and what the White Hat mission is and why Trump and the White Hats are operating this way. And please understand that Trump does not operate on his own. They use an AI. There's a whole group of generals behind him, as well as arguably, people like me, psychic intuitives, remote viewers, and so on and so forth. So they don't make decisions without consulting a whole group and probably a fairly large group, at least in many cases. And this would be one of those cases. So this is a scenario that is told about in Q. The Q drops were supposed to inform people as to what was coming. 107 is a spokesperson trying to inform you about what's coming. He's still doing it. He's mostly on Rumble, but he's on lots of different people's channels. I interviewed him back in 2021, I guess it was. And just one time, and he said he'd never do another interview with me because he believes I would make him break his security oath. Why he thought that, I don't know. Okay. Other than he thinks I have special powers or my questions are too provocative or whatever it is. So you can figure that out for yourself. But the idea here is to continue this article, why they're doing what they're doing. They haven't suddenly morphed into Nazis. Trump does not want to rule the world or anything else. He is actually doing a service to humanity. Whether you like it or not, that's the way they see it. Okay. So I'm going to further explain. And the reason I know more about the White Hats than most people is that I interacted with them as far back as 2010 when they weren't even public. They're not that public now, but they did come forward over those years periodically in short times with Juan O'Savin or Wayne Willett going on shows like I forget their names, Doug Hagman, I think, and his brother, and so on. So Juan O'Savin has been a spokesperson for them for many, many years, and understanding his credentials behind the scene is crucial to understanding the veracity with which he speaks. However, like any military operation and a clandestine secret group, the white hat military do probably mislead us from time to time. But I think by and large, he tries to tell the truth to the people. So back to this article. So the fact that the white hat military are trying to flush out their enemy combatants, and this is a lot like Israel going into what they did in Palestine with Hamas, and the end of that a little exercise was genocide. So I'm trying to warn the white hats that this might not be the best approach, but they have a purpose in mind. And like when you have an objective, and lots of people don't understand your objective, but that's what guides you. So understanding they have an objective here, and I believe I know what it is, for what it's worth. So understanding ICE is a part of a provocative force put together to cause reactionary actions by the ones who hate Trump. Basically, they're going to do things that you don't agree with. And what the reason for that is that during the 4 years when Trump was actually had already put in place COG, Biden was dead, played by this actor. And in March, I think it was March 11th of 2021, shortly after the inauguration of the fake Biden, Trump was actually reinstated by the military in a ceremony as the commander in chief. So during the years when the border was supposedly open, it was actually the white hats that were leaving it open. Now, they did it on purpose. It's kind of like anything. It's like The Godfather is the best example of this type of thing. So you have one organization that is in competition and mortal enemies with another group, and they're both trying to run the same piece of territory, in this case, the United States. The New World Order, the UN, the Illuminati, the Schwab and his minions and others like him are part of the New World Order, of course, the World Economic Forum, Hillary, Obama, and these are people that have also let in sort of encouraged communism, whatever you want to call that, even though Russia is theoretically no longer communist. It does have a dictator, which is Putin, of course. They supposedly have some form of democracy, which sounds like it's maybe a financial form of democracy. I've traveled to Russia. I've interviewed people in Russia, including Boriska, the boy from Mars, who was a child that had total recall of his past life and used to walk around his Russian city. And tell the fortunes of the people around him and talk about his past life as a soldier on Mars and so on. And that interview is very popular. It's on my website. It's a very famous interview. And that was done in around 2009, as I recall. Anyway, getting back to this thing. So here we are with fleshing out the military aged men, of which there are arguably around 2 million who came in through the border, possibly even more. Now, there's an important key element you have to understand, which is that we have had a gray human abduction program that first was going on mainly, from what I understand, the history, back in the 19 maybe 30s and 40s. And the Greys had actually gone to our government, made a deal with our government that they would abduct humans and then they would put them back after making some kind of experiments on our genetics. Then it changed, and basically they kind of lied to our government. Eventually, our government made an agreement with them to go south of the border to carry on their genetic experiments. The abductions also involved adrenochrome of children, teenagers, and part of the human body that is actually made into a solution using blood and sort of elements of our glandular structure and putting it into this thing that is known as loosh and drinking it or whatever. And this is something that has made the rounds in our society and become an epidemic, really, of these Illuminati, bloodthirsty, satanic cults. And that includes places like Epstein's Island, where they were brought into a honeypot situation, seducing young children, and some of whom were probably killed. It's very distasteful to even talk about, but it's a really horrible thing that has been going on in our society. But prior to that, it was also part of cults in the Middle East. Even Göbekli Tepe, where I actually did an investigation and made a short documentary film, they found that there were mounds of little skulls of little children in these sacrificial zones. So this goes way back, even before that. And there are still blood cults that are involved in this. And now it's gotten into government, the UK. Savile, I think his last name, was one of those pedophile type people that was even backed and supported and hidden by the BBC, who are culpable in that situation, as far as I'm concerned, and many others. And this is going on in many countries with human trafficking and child trafficking and so on and so forth. So understanding that one of the missions of the White Hats was to stop this, to stop the adrenochrome highway, as I call it, to stop the sacrifice of children and the human trafficking going on our planet. So they have been going into underground bases where the children are held captive until they decide to use them for whatever purpose, and so on, and rescuing them. This is part of the White Hat background of what we, who are part of, loosely speaking, part of MAGA, who believe in what they are doing. And one of the first things Trump did when he came into office was to sign into law the fact that if you were captured in association with any child trafficking, that all your funds would be confiscated. I think that was one of the principles of the, or part of the whole statute, or whatever you call it. So going back to this situation, it's important to understand the setting. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you never followed Q and you have no idea who the White Hat military are, which is Space Force, certainly part of the Navy and most of the other branches in part, but there's a lot of dissension within the military. There are a lot of Satanists like Michael Aquino, who died recently, supposedly, and he was an openly satanic in general, or whatever he was. I forget his rank. And then, things that he did in the Presidio in San Francisco was associated with all of that. And other generals who you may just think are very honorable people are not. They're satanic. They feed on children and so on and so forth. So, understanding this is the context we're dealing with. We're not dealing with just a political left and right that don't agree on, the method of voting, which is one contentious area. This is a world war to take down the United States and to actually take over. It's a satanic, gray, reptilian exercise, if you want to call it that, or objective to take over our planet. So this is deadly serious. People do not understand why ICE is so, I guess you might say, passionate and serious about how they're operating. That's because this is what the background of what they understand is. You don't have to agree with it, but this is how they see it. So if you're fighting ICE, you are actually fighting the white hats. If you're fighting the white hats, you're fighting in favor of child trafficking and the murder and torture of children. So getting back to the writing I wrote here is the key is that they want to flesh out some of the millions of military-aged men hidden in the neighborhoods, at which point, in my view, they will probably round them up and take them underground or simply offer them large sums of money, persuade them to join the gray human hybrid army that we are creating out of these trespassers, if you will, and mind controlling them in some cases. In some cases, all they have to do is make them an offer they don't want to refuse, because they will see, that their life would much improve if they were to join us. And this would be in defense of humanity if they understood the stakes. And the stakes are actually planetary. This is the rule of our planet that is at stake. And why the White Hats, and particularly Juan O'Savin, refuse to tell you the real story is because they don't think you can handle the truth. And I don't agree with that. I don't see any reason why other humans like myself can't handle this truth. It's real, it's unequivocal, and there's plenty of evidence of what I'm talking about, believe me. So going back here, so what again they're doing is trying to create a hybrid army. And these, what are gray human hybrids, have special powers, which is what the X-Men movies were all about. That's real. Grays have special powers that we don't necessarily have as much access to. A lot of times we have similar powers, but we don't know how to use them. They can move things with their mind, something from one part of the room to another part of the room, that kind of thing. They can influence long or short distance. They can, in theory, they're telepaths, as we are. So lots of the skills that grays have are things that we have in our sort of genome, but have not been actualized in most members of this human population. So it's a good thing to keep in mind that this is not something so foreign to us. It's something that we have access to. It's something we can use to understand the current situation. And I encourage you to take my words seriously, to use your heart and mind to figure out if I'm telling the truth, and then do your own research. That's basically what's required here. And so, as I say, what they want to do is turn these young men, predominantly men, but I'm sure there's women warriors as well, just like in any society. So some of the women will be disguised perhaps as, maybe feminine and very, and not warriors. But I can assure you that women are very capable of being warriors and deceiving men around them as to their abilities. So what we have is an army coming across our border for the last 4 years, being let in. Supposedly, the White Hat's not letting them in, but the Biden administration, the Chinese communists, and the MI6 and other backers of that situation, who also stole our election, and they have all the proof of this. They are basically invading our borders. They are responsible, but the Greys primarily have been mind controlling a lot of their human alien hybrids to swarm our border. So a lot of them have been mind controlled. And so I think our job here is to stop the mind control. So getting back to this article, our SSP whistleblower, Pete Peterson, also admitted that this invasion of androids run by AI is coming. Okay. And even in Camelot, we were told in the early days that there would be a World War III, and that would just be a preparation war with China and with Iran and so on, and that Russia would eventually be on our side in that war, and that eventually we would be facing this opponent that's coming from off planet. And I have military whistleblower testimony saying that they have been being trained to basically fight aliens. And you may know about other types of things, games children are playing, and books, that are out there, that are also teaching children to fight aliens. So this is actually a secret objective of the planet, to save our planet from invasion, to save our planet from takeover. And I think it's so important that people start following my work and really listening to all the things I've been doing and interviewing all the whistleblowers I've interviewed over the years. Classic Camelot is on the front page of my website. That's one place you can find a lot of early interviews with excellent whistleblowers. My work is very highly regarded. On the screen behind me is my book that I wrote early on, and that tells something of my story if you're interested in that. But I have two books that just came out that are also about the Mark Richards testimony. He reveals all kinds of secret information that people are not aware of. So if you like to learn and you want to know more about our planet and the world beyond the planet as well, and various alien races, then I encourage you to look into my work much deeper. And let's see. So our whistleblower, Pete Peterson, has admitted on camera that we have armies of androids hidden in underground bases, and so does China. They also need to have like a human army. And I think that our troops are not all up to par. So they could take some of these gray human hybrids and bring them into our army and have them much more equipped than some of the ones that are growing older in our troops, and so on and so forth. Ones that maybe were not recruited with the idea in mind that they needed special powers beyond the six normal senses, for example. So he designed what he said was a sky chip that would prevent alien androids from turning our own android armies against us. And that includes AI. So whether he was right or wrong is kind of immaterial. We can't prove it one way or another, at least, in the public sector. But behind the scenes, I'm sure that the SSP knows whether his statements were just ego or whether they actually are true, and whether his technology, he has passed on, by the way, since a few years ago. But I have had many interviews with him, and actually David Wilcock, I think, interviewed him. Gaia TV, I think, interviewed him. So it's worth knowing there are other interviews out there with him. He's a brilliant man, hands down. And so we did our interviews in person with him, that really groundbreaking interviews. And of all three interviews that we did with him, the Pentagon called him back to the Pentagon. He I think he was interrogated when he went back to the Pentagon, and they told him to try to convince me not to publish my section. That was the one section he was really concerned about. But we had already published it because he was gone for a while at the Pentagon, and we basically decided to green light the interviews. And so what you're going to find is the most truth is going to be in the third interview. But the other interviews are good and they contain a lot of good information as well. Okay, so going back to my article, I'm going to actually switch on to and this is my Substack. It's called Kerry Cassidy News and Views. It's called The Great Border Deception, Gray Human Hybrids, and ICE, the invasion no one's talking about. And I actually wrote and published it yesterday, and today I did the addendum part that I just read to you. And this is Logan, the X-Men movie Logan. You might recognize the young actress who did a fabulous job. And I think I would highly encourage you to watch that movie again to understand that they were depicting the gray human hybrids, and this is a gray human hybrid child. Okay, so this is an article where I sort of lay things on the line and give more explanation. I also have links to other articles like Gordon Duff, a former or current CIA agent who is the editor of the Intel Drop, wrote a very good article on what it appears to be and what happened in terms of the legalities of ICE operating in our country and the controversy whether the individual who was murdered, why he had a gun, the fact that he had a cell phone in his hand, and so on. So you can get into all of that there. There's also the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, who wants ICE to leave his city. These are people that do not understand what is going on. And it's like, because again, and I am very critical about this situation, I have to say, because I believe that the White Hats, and Juan in particular, since it's his responsibility to tell the truth, are not educating people sufficiently. And I can also tell you that they didn't want people to know anything more about aliens. They've actually blackballed me, tried to kick me out of any kind of social gatherings they have going on. They've tried to exclude me in every way. And they also have told me and Simon Parks, who is another person who is considered something of an expert on the ET situation, to not talk about ETs. All they want people to think about is who to vote for and the vote and how it's conducted. And I am also not a fan of their solution, which I think is old-fashioned. I don't think it's going to work. I think it's going to cause the kind of trouble that you see with ICE. And I think that in the end, they should be using blockchain for the vote, just like they do for our money, and so on. So it's a track and trace operation. They want you to go in person to vote from now on with a piece of paper. It doesn't work in Egypt. It's not going to work here. It's just because you use paper doesn't mean that someone isn't paying you for your vote behind the scenes before you go to the office. So the dark side clandestine operations are going to be just as much in operation during the vote. And I really don't think their solution is a good one. So anyway, I do understand that we need an honest vote. Okay. So don't get me wrong there. But I think there's various ways to do things, and using high technology is a much better way to track and trace and get real votes from real people. There can be various things that they do. And one of the things I also want to say is that trying to transport immigrant families with little kids back across the border and telling them to come back across the border and re-register is insane. All they have to do is file some paperwork. You can decide then, they could be interviewed by someone who comes to their house and interviews them, decides then whether they can be allowed to stay in our country, and then ship them out if they're not worthy, or you think that they're hiding a son or a daughter that's part of the New World Order troops, and all of that kind of thing. So there's many ways they could be handling this. But again, what they're doing is this thing where they flush out, make people angry, try to expose the young or soldiers, military-aged men and women, needless to say, in those communities so they can track where they are and all of that. They are able to use a frequency fence at the border, just so you know. So anybody who crosses the border is going to be surveilled, not just in conventional ways, but also by what's called frequency, which is how the aliens track us. And they don't have to be anywhere near them. They can be using a satellite up in the sky. It could be part of the frequency fence, which is the border fence. And it doesn't matter whether they just cross over, they walk in front of it. They have these at airports as well. Understand that the technology you think is surveillance technology is 10 years or more behind the scene, behind the times. So this is crucial. Most Americans and other people in other countries are completely naive as to the level of sophistication of the technology that the white hat military, the US military, has at their disposal. They are working with a group from Inner Earth that are positive. They are also working with, I believe, the Venusians. And I have said in the past that I believe that um, Melania is probably Venusian. They're probably working with the Pleiadians as well, and so on. They're not working. I don't think they're stupid enough to be working with the Galactic Federation. So the Galactic Federation is infiltrated by negative, regressive ETs. So just be aware of that. Um, Again, my information comes from all of my source information I've gotten for 20 years of testimony from whistleblowers who we knew back in those days, where who they really were, their credentials, and so on, in most cases. And my testimonies that I recorded have held up over these 20 years. I can also say that, as a psychic intuitive, I'm almost always right when I predict something or just have inner knowing about it. I don't publish it. I'm not into publishing predictions, but I do share once in a while little bits and pieces that I downloads that I get. So anything, if you watch my interviews, you'll maybe pick up on some of those things. So thank you again for watching. Thank you if you are someone who has been following my work, and thank you so much for donations, for joining my site. Any amount of money that you can donate to Project Camelot is greatly appreciated. Lately, some people have sent me some fairly large donations, and I just want to thank them. I'm sorry that I'm not able to take the time and write letters of thank you and so on and so forth. I hope you understand that this is a labor of love. I work around the clock. I'm notorious for doing that. And I really am interested. My mission is to save humanity, to save the planet, and to protect the children. So that's my dedication. I am also dedicated to the truth and nothing but the truth. I believe you can handle the truth. I believe you should handle the truth. And if you don't think you can handle the truth, then I think you need to do some deep meditation and get yourself into a position where you can. We are all alien human hybrids, by the way. So I can understand a lot of people don't want to hear that. They think Adam's seed is something special. No, they are all great. We are all a mixture of races, okay? And that's why we look so different. And it's an incredible experiment. I highly recommend the Ashiana Dean Voyager books that talk about the War of Worlds that has been going on above our heads, on our Earth, underground, and undersea. where there are bases of various alien races everywhere and also in space, and that we are going interstellar. Our secret space program has a patrol called Solar Warden that patrols our solar system for invaders. They're very aware of Three Eye Atlas. They have actually attacked it, I think, twice and been pushed back. So just I have many videos about all these subjects, and you can delve into my website and my Substack and get a huge amount of information. Pace yourself, try to learn as much as you can. Understand that hiding your head in the sand is not going to solve your world. Okay, it's not going to help anyone. I think you need to be the hero of your own life. You need to make decisions that are going to make your children proud of you. I think you need to understand that your children are actually alien human hybrids of various kinds, not necessarily gray, but they're just the most recent invasion. All right. So we have been invaded going back centuries, back to the days of Egypt, back to the days of Atlantis, and so on. So I want to thank you for watching and listening, and take care. And please donate if you possibly can. Thank you.